Look at your hands. Right now, look at them. You think those hands belong to one species. You think you are the result of a clean, straight-line ape to human, one logical step at a time. You are wrong. 50,000 years ago, this planet was not yours. You shared it with at least 5 other species of human. Other minds, other hands, other beings who buried their dead, made jewelry, and stared up at the exact same stars you stare at now. And then in the blink of a geological eye, they were all gone. Every single one. But here's the part no one talks about. They didn't disappear into the dirt. They disappeared into you. Your entire life, you have been sold a picture. An ape, hunched over, knuckles dragging. Then slowly, it straightens up. It sheds its fur. It picks up a spear. And it becomes you. One clean line. One winner. That diagram, the one burned into every biology textbook you've ever touched, was invented in 1965 as a magazine illustration. It was never meant to be science. It was art. And it infected how an entire civilization understood its own origins. The truth looks nothing like a line. It looks like a bush, tangled, sprawling, dozens of branches shooting off in every direction, and almost all of them dead ends. You are not the pinnacle of that bush. You're the last surviving twig. And for most of the story, you are not alone on it. I'm going to show you 5 species of human that existed alongside your ancestors. But the last one, found deepest in a cave in South Africa, is going to completely destroy what you thought you knew about intelligence itself. Hashtag Earth. A crowded house. Rewind the clock. 50,000 years ago, you're walking down a dirt path at dusk. You round a corner, and someone is standing there. They look almost like you, but the brow is heavier. The chest is wider. The skull has a different shape entirely. You might think, stranger, but they are not a stranger. They are a different species of human. That is not a thought experiment. That is the actual reality your great-great-grandparents navigated every single day for tens of thousands of years. Earth was not a lonely planet. Earth was a crowded house. You had giants in the north. You had humans the size of children in the tropics. You had species perfectly engineered for ice, for altitude, for caves so dark that no light had ever touched their walls. And they all lived, at the same time, on the same planet, as you. One of them, a species that's been dead for 30,000 years, is living inside your body right now, actively protecting you from disease. Stay with me. Hashtag the Neanderthals. Look to Europe, ancient Europe, the kind of cold that kills you in hours if you stop moving. Neanderthals have already been here for 200,000 years. Let that number sink in. By the time your ancestors arrived in Europe, Neanderthals had already survived there in bone-cracking, relentless cold for 200,000 years. That is longer than modern humans have existed at all. And they were not what you were taught. They built complex fires with specific, carefully chosen materials. They buried their dead deliberately with objects with what can only be described as ritual. They made jewelry from eagle claws and drilled seashells. They painted their bodies with ochre. These are not the grunting brutes from your high school textbook. Could you survive an ice age, no central heating, no polyester, no grocery store for 200,000 years? They did. For decades, science treated them as evolutionary footnotes. The inferior version of you. The losers of the human race. Then, in 2010, a Swedish geneticist named Svana Pabo did something that most scientists had called impossible. He extracted DNA from a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal bone fragment. He mapped their entire genome from degraded, ancient material. And the results rewrote history. Your ancestors did not just fight the Neanderthals. They fell in love with them. They had children with them. If you're of European or Asian descent right now, in your blood, in your cells, up to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. It shapes your immune system. It influences how your body fights infection today. It affects how your hair grows and how your blood clots. The Neanderthal is not extinct. They're you, partially. Hashtag the Denisovans. But the Neanderthals are not even the strangest ones. Because in a cave in Siberia, scientists found a single pinky bone, and it pointed to an entirely new human species that no one had ever imagined. Deep in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, a cave, cold and dark and ancient. In 2008, scientists found a fragment of a pinky bone inside it. It belonged to a young girl. It looked completely ordinary. But when geneticist Johannes Krauss analyzed the mitochondrial DNA locked inside, the sequence stopped him cold. It did not match modern humans. It did not match Neanderthals. We call them the Denisovans. And they are one of the most bizarre chapters in all of human history because they're almost entirely invisible. Think about this. For every other human species, we have skulls, we have skeletons, we have tools, campsites, entire archaeological layers of evidence. For the Denisovans, a pinky, a jawbone, a few teeth. That is all. And yet from just that DNA, we know they spread across a massive portion of the ancient world. They adapted to the thin, freezing air of the Tibetan Plateau. They crossed open ocean to reach the islands of Southeast Asia. And they interbred with your ancestors, just like the Neanderthals did. Here is where it gets extraordinary. Modern Tibetans can live and work at extreme altitudes, places where most humans' blood thickens and their organs begin to fail without any of that. Their bodies process low oxygen in a completely unique way. For years, scientists could not explain how. Then they found the answer. A specific gene, EPAS1, that allows Tibetan bodies to thrive in thin air was inherited directly from the Denisovans. Your ancestors met them on the roof of the world, had children with them, and those children carried a genetic superpower that let them conquer the highest places on Earth. And in the Philippines, in Papua New Guinea, indigenous populations today carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. 5%. From a species we only know from a single pinky bone. Hashtag homonality. Now go south deep into the caves of Africa. Because what scientists found there challenges everything we thought we understood about intelligence, consciousness, and what it actually means to be human. South Africa, the Rising Star Cave System. To reach the chamber inside, you have to squeeze through a crack in the rock barely wide enough for a human body. The drop on the other side is a 10-meter fall into total darkness. Paleoanthropologist Lee Berger sent a team through anyway. Thousands of bones. They belong to a species called homonality. And homonality is wrong in the most fascinating way possible. Their brains were the size of an orange, a third the size of yours. Their fingers were long and curved, built for climbing trees. Their feet looked like something from millions of years in the past. Every physical feature they had belonged to ancient history. Yet carbon dating placed them alive at the same time as your direct ancestors. 230,000 years ago, they were your contemporaries. But the real mystery is this. That chamber, the one filled with their bones, has no other way in. No water could have washed the bones there. No predator could have dragged them through that crack. The only way those bones got into that chamber is if homonality carried them there. Deliberately. They had no fire that we found. They navigated a pitch-black cave system with a brain a third the size of yours to place their dead in a hidden, unreachable chamber. What does that mean? It means ritual. It means intention. It means some form of symbolic thought that we told ourselves required a large, complex brain to produce. We were wrong. The island hobbits, the island species, come next. And one of them, barely 3 feet tall, hunting miniature elephants, fighting giant birds, sounds so impossible that when the fossil was first published, other scientists accused the discoverers of fraud. Crossed the ocean to Indonesia, the island of Flores. Here, until just 50,000 years ago, lived Homo floresiensis. They stood barely a meter tall. They had brains the size of a grapefruit, and they hunted miniature elephants. That sentence is not a joke. Flores was an island, cut off from the mainland for millions of years. Evolution on an island is strange. Resources are limited. Large animals shrink to survive on less food. Science calls it insular dwarfism. The hobbits were insular dwarfism in action, perfectly engineered for their small world. Hunting small prey, fighting off giant Komodo dragons, and massive prehistoric storks. Now imagine you are an early Homo sapiens on a boat. You have crossed open water days of travel. You land on a tropical beach, and small human beings walk out of the trees, holding tiny stone spears. That is not mythology. That is not Tolkien. That is your actual planetary history. Slightly to the north, on the island of Luzon, another island human was doing the exact same thing. Homo luzonensis. Small, strange, perfectly adapted, discovered only in 2019. We are still finding them. The emptying house. What happened to all of them? Because what the fossil record suggests about your ancestors about you is not comfortable. For millions of years, the Earth was a crowded house. Multiple minds, multiple species, multiple ways of being human. Then, in the span of a few thousand years, an eye blink in geological time, the house empties. Every species, except one, you. So what happened? The fossil record shows violence. Crushed skulls, spear wounds on Neanderthal bones, evidence of Homo sapiens expanding across continents at speed, and every other human species retreating or disappearing in that same direction. At that same time, you are an intensely territorial species. You know this. You see it every day. When your ancestors moved, they brought advanced weapons and a fierce, aggressive drive to expand. And the pattern in region after region looks uncomfortably familiar. Maybe it was climate. The ice ages fluctuated wildly. Vast forests vanished. The massive animals Neanderthals had hunted for generations began dying off. Your ancestors were generalists. They could eat almost anything, adapt to almost any environment. The Neanderthals were specialists, optimized for that world. When the world changed, they couldn't pivot fast enough. The Denisovans? Probably absorbed, genetically swallowed by arriving populations, their physical form gone, their DNA living on. The hobbits of Flores? A volcanic eruption, a catastrophic event on a tiny island with nowhere to run. Most likely, it was all of it at once. Competition, climate collapse, genetic absorption, a perfect storm hitting 5 different species across 50,000 years. The decisive edge. But here is the hardest realization of all. Your ancestors were not smarter. They were not inherently superior. There is no evidence that Homo sapiens was more intelligent than a Neanderthal in any meaningful cognitive sense. What your ancestors had was something more dangerous than intelligence. They were aggressively adaptable, generalists in a world that suddenly demanded generalists. When the food ran out, they had networks, vast, invisible webs of trade and alliance stretching across hundreds of kilometers. When a tribe's hunt failed, they called for help. When they needed knowledge, they shared it across distance. The Neanderthals had family groups. Small, tightly bonded, isolated. When times got hard, there was no one to call. It wasn't the spear that saved you. It was the story, the ability to create myths, to make a stranger trust you by sharing a belief, to organize hundreds of people who had never met around an idea that didn't physically exist. That was the decisive edge, the evolutionary orphan. You're the most social species in the history of this planet. Your brain is wired physically, chemically wired to seek connection with other minds, with other beings who look back at you and reflect your own experience. And right now, you are aiming giant radio telescopes at the dark void of space, desperately broadcasting signals, hoping something out there will answer. But you used to have that, right here, on this planet. Other minds who looked up at the same stars and wondered what they were. Other beings who felt grief and made art and cared for their dead. Other people, and I use that word deliberately, who shared this world with you. You had brothers. You had sisters. And they are gone. You are an evolutionary orphan. You build artificial intelligence because some part of you wants something to talk to that understands. You write science fiction about alien contact because you crave an encounter with a genuinely different mind. You are searching for a reflection, but the reflection was already here, and you lost it. Or did you? The museum within. Go look in a mirror. I mean it. Look closely. Your genome is not a clean record of one species. It is a graveyard, and it is a museum. You carry Neanderthal DNA in the genes that run your immune system right now as your body fights off whatever microscopic threat it encountered today. The cold resilience of a species that survived 200,000 years of ice age is living inside you, still working. You carry Denisovan DNA in the genes that let certain people climb to the roof of the world and breathe. In the genetic blueprints your body shares without knowing it with a ghost species that left only a pinky bone behind. You're not a single, pure lineage. You're a mosaic, a living, breathing archive of every extinction event that shaped the last 100,000 years. You are the result of meetings, of conflicts, of love and war between species that science is only now beginning to understand. Every time you reach out and touch someone with these hands, the ones you looked at the start of this video, you are touching with hands shaped by a dozen lost worlds. They did not vanish into the dirt. They vanished into you. The next time you feel isolated, the next time the loneliness feels unbearable, remember what you actually are. You are the survivor of a planetary extinction. You carry the genetic memory of 5 separate species of human. You are the vessel of every mind that ever looked up at these same stars before you. You are not the end of the story. You are the part of the story that remembers all the others. If this made you feel something, if the idea that you might be carrying DNA from a species we only know from a single bone sounds impossible, wait, until you see what that DNA is actually doing inside your body in real time. That's the next video.